Well, as this country struggles to get a handle on this coronavirus pandemic, some states are seeing record spikes. One of those states is Arizona. According to the Arizona Department of Health Services, the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases there have surpassed 112,000, and the number of deaths reached more than 2,000. So Jim Nintzel is the executive editor of Tucson Weekly and is joining us now to give us an idea of what's happening on the ground. Jim, we can talk numbers, but we know that when it comes to the coronavirus, determining whether or not this is a crisis has a lot to do with what the medical facilities in the area can handle. So give us a sense of the type of pressure that hospitals in Arizona are under.
They are under tremendous pressure here. The numbers fluctuate, the people go in, people go out, so it's a fluid situation, but they are very near capacity. There have been cases where people go into the hospital in Tucson and get transferred to Phoenix or California or New Mexico or Las Vegas. It's been a real problem being able to handle the cases that are coming in. And you can imagine what it's like to have a loved one go into the hospital in this kind of with this kind of health issue and then get transferred away where, even with they're in town, it's hard to get in, impossible to get in to see people in the hospital. But when they're away, you just don't know what's going on. It's a really heartbreaking situation as those kinds of transfers happen. It's just a terrible situation for the healthcare community. And it's not just about hospital beds. It's also about staffing. Our healthcare workers are simply exhausted dealing with this crisis. And although they're bringing people in from out of state to try to supplement what we have here, there is a huge crisis for the healthcare community here in Arizona.
And I think, Arizona is such an interesting case because, when New York was the epicenter, Arizona wasn't, you didn't have the same numbers in Arizona as there was in New York. I mean, no place did. And so Arizona was sort of late to close and then early to open. The numbers weren't there. Are experts seeing or linking the reopening of the state to the spike in COVID cases?
Oh, absolutely. I think what happened was when Governor Ducey lifted the stay-at-home order in mid-May, he said we are clearly on the other side of this pandemic, and I don't think he's ever been more wrong than when he said that. I think it's something that he probably regrets tremendously. The stay-at-home order, when we lifted that, we had just barely made the conditions to enter into phase one under the CDC guidelines. We're clearly we're not hitting any of those metrics anymore, and we probably should be back in a shutdown mode according to the CDC guidelines, although Governor Ducey is obviously not willing to do that. He had a press conference yesterday, and his big step was to say that restaurants had to reduce their capacity to 50%, and I think that's being generously considered a half measure at this point. Last week he did close gyms and some bars, but he's not closing all the bars. If your bar offers food service of a certain kind, you can still stay open. So I think there's a tremendous amount of frustration on the part of the health officials and a lot of the public that so much remains open here in Arizona.
Yeah, the decision about bars is so mind-boggling to me because we have seen spikes in Florida, spikes in California that are directly linked to bars. Bars are an issue in the way that outdoor dining doesn't seem to be. And the other thing that's really interesting about Arizona, and perhaps it's because of the messaging that's coming from the governor and others, is there's a really vocal anti-mask movement, if you will, there. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of like, masks have become kind of part of this culture war now, and it's kind of raging in Arizona too.
It absolutely is. The governor initially said that no local authorities could take any steps stronger than what he was allowing, and masks were not allowed to be mandated. A few weeks ago, he did say masks could be mandated by local officials, and many of them have stepped up to do that. And here in Pima County, the entire county is you're required to wear a mask. However, enforcement is a whole nother another story. And you're absolutely right. There is a significant number of people who feel as though the masks are a plot by the New World Order. We had a county supervisor here in Pima County who suggested that wearing a mask could cause lung cancer because you breathe an increased amount of CO2 and it would inflame your lungs and you'd get cancer. So there's just some ridiculous things being said about these masks that obviously healthcare professionals are able to wear without any kind of real trouble. And you know, masks are not a cure-all, you know, and people are going to wear them wrong. They're not going to be perfect, but they're better than nothing. There's obviously a lot of evidence that shows that if you wear a mask, you're reducing the amount of potential virus particles you're breathing out and potentially reducing the numbers you breathe in.
Yeah, you know, I'm glad you brought up the thing about healthcare providers as well. I mean, not only do they wear masks for their entire shift, day in and day out, their masks are of a higher quality than many of the masks that we get because they need it to be of a higher quality, and they are not getting sick. It's just common sense. But, you know, this is an argument that's raging across the country, science versus not science. It's an argument that's happening within my own family. Sometimes I want to pull my hair out. The presumptive Democratic nominee, Joe Biden, sort of put the spotlight on the situation in Arizona and blamed the president, saying that the president, you know, his desire to slow down testing is what's contributing to what we see in Arizona. What's the situation when it comes to testing in Arizona?
It's not as good as it really ought to be. We've done a lot of testing, but not nearly enough. The governor yesterday, as part of his press conference, did say that he was going to make another step to do a testing blitz to ramp up testing. But you're right, Joe Biden, who is seeing a real opportunity in Arizona, and only one Democrat has won Arizona since the Truman days, and that was Bill Clinton in 1996. He really sees Arizona as a swing state this year. He came out this week and said that testing needed to increase here in Arizona. That's being pushed by the Democrats in our congressional delegation as well. They're asking FEMA to come in and assist with all of this. So far, we haven't seen a lot of calls in that direction from the governor's office or from Republicans who represent Arizona in Congress. So I think there's certainly a political element to this that Democrats are hoping to be able to capitalize on. Because we have a very important Senate race here, a very competitive Senate race here in Arizona this year, as well as the hopes of Democrats of actually taking over the state legislature for one or even both houses.
So listen, before I let you go, got to ask you about the situation when it comes to schools. The president said he's going to be pressuring states to reopen. I don't know if in Arizona you guys open you start schools in August or September. Some of the places where it's a little hotter, like Florida, start in August. But what are the plans? We haven't even seen the CDC guidelines yet. Do we know what's going on with schools in Arizona?
We know what's going on with some of them, but the situation's very much up in the air. The schools were supposed to start on August 3rd. The governor pushed that date back to August 17th. There's an amazing amount of trepidation among many parents about going back to school, sending their kids back to school. Obviously, the teachers and administrators are very concerned about working in schools because these are congregate settings, and you've got a lot of people in very close quarters and under normal circumstances. So the school districts are all making different plans. The biggest school district in Tucson here, where I am, has decided that they are going to go to distance learning until they determine it is safe to go back to the classroom. And I got to tell you, as a parent, it's not easy to be working a job and trying to homeschool your kid, even with the efforts that the school districts are making. And I think a lot of parents feel the same way, but at the same time, they're not feeling like it's safe to send their kids back. Other school districts are still working out their plans. We are expecting announcements in the next few weeks to find out exactly what's going on. But the state superintendent of public instruction says we are not going to get anywhere back to normal until we get a handle on these numbers.
Yeah, that's at the end of the day, you gotta flatten that curve if anything's going to be moving forward. Jim Nintzel, thank you so much.
My pleasure.